click the live.
For you.
I want to make sure that we're all live here. And let's see, let me go back. I can't see anybody. Okay, we should be, and I'm just going to double check that we're live here. This is the event. I shouldn't be in here. Let's see. Let me get back onto our page. Just going to double check that this is all working. Yep, okay.
Right.
We're live, and I'm just going to share. Yeah, Corey, you're causing a feedback, an echo. I'm not sure what's going on.
That's bad.
Yeah, let me
You can
just
still
see.
hear it?
Let me just see if I mute you for a second, if it's still you. Hold on one second. Okay. Okay, just muted you. Mark, yeah, it's definitely Corey. Something's going on with an echo. So let's see if maybe
Is
you
it
got
still
your
there now?
headphones in. Okay, nope, that's a little bit better.
Yeah, I had headphones in. I just unplugged them. Problem. So.
Okay, perfect. So I'm just going to quickly, I want to just share this really quickly with everybody, and so that we have this in the right places, and then we can get started with the show. So how is everybody doing today?
Wonderful.
Great.
Doing well.
Great. We were going to have Eric and Denise from Integrity Billing had an emergency, so they're not going to be joining us today. So I'm just going to post this a couple of good groups so everybody can see this, and then we're going to get started. Let's share this now here, and one more group here. This way people in the different groups can be able to watch along live with us, and then I can share it later on as well into some of the other different. And let's just do this. Okay. And my earring just fell out. Okay. So, all right, we're going to start in. Let me just find this one other group and post it. Okay, great. And grab my earring that just fell out of my ear, and we'll get started. So, welcome everybody to the Addiction 911 show. So, we're all here. We were here today. We're going to be talking about ending the stigma around addiction and the shame, and how we can get past that so that we can get the help for the addicts that they need, and how the families can deal with that. So I have today with me, we have Mark Astor, who is a drug and alcohol attorney, Corey Wolcott, who's from Genesis House, and Jim Henderson from MedEz Software Solutions. I want to welcome you all today. Thank you guys so much for being here. And we're going to get started, and I'm going to make sure I think that Corey up on the screen right now. So I want to ask you guys, the first question I want to ask, I know out of the three of you, now Corey, is anybody here a former addict who was in recovery out of the three of you?
Yeah, I'm in recovery.
Okay, great. So let's start with Corey. Corey, I want to ask you, obviously when you were going through your addiction, did you feel the shame and the stigma, and how did that feel for you from an addict's perspective?
Like as in when I was still in active addiction?
Yes.
I mean, yeah, of course there was shame and stigma. I don't know, I have a somewhat unpopular opinion and perspective on stigma.
Okay.
So, for
and what
me,
is that?
it was a big part in pushing me to get my life together. I think the shame and stigma of living the wrong way played a huge role in me knowing that I was living the wrong way and that I needed to go get some help. I just posted a video earlier this week about stigma and how I'm tired of hearing about it.
Oh, okay. Well, that's good. This is what we want on this panel. We want to have different opinions, and so we can debate this, and have a good discussion about this. So, okay, so I'm going to just jump over to Jim and Mark and just see. Let's just first get a reading on everybody's feelings here. Mark, what about you? What are your feelings about the stigma and shame of addiction?
So, I think from my perspective, when I'm typically dealing with it, when I'm sitting with a mom and dad, right? And I think the frustrating thing for parents is they cannot understand. Now I'm getting feedback.
Yes, I hear this feedback. Yes.
What they can't seem to understand is why can't their child, their son, their daughter, just stop? Like, why can't they make that rational decision? And I think for the parents, I think it's very difficult for them to understand that it's a disease of the mind, and that if their son or daughter could stop, they would stop. And so I think that when it comes to the stigma issue, I think what's going on here is that sort of the perception is these people are, I don't know, they think they're crazy, or they're just very, very bad people who won't stop using, drugs, and therefore, why should we care about them? And so I think that's the public perception, right? It's as if it's something that the addict can control. And if they just, puck it up, as it were, and, made the strong decision and got strong, they could give it up. And so I think that's the stigma that I see from my perspective. And it's a conversation I have with the parents, and I explain to them, look, it's not your fault, because there's always that certain guilt factor. It's not your son or your daughter's fault. It just is. And if they could stop doing it, they would. So, I mean, that's the thing. It's not something you could just stop doing. If you could, you would. So that from my perspective, that's what I see when it comes to stigma.
Okay, wonderful. Thank you, Mark, for sharing. And I'm going to ask Jim the same question. What is your feelings about the stigma? Do you agree more with Corey, or do you agree more with Mark?
Well, I think if it's a motivational factor to get somebody into treatment, I don't really care about the stigma, because at the end, you want them to have a future. And substance abuse is all about repairing their future, something that hasn't occurred yet. And if you look at it in terms of an illness, in 2016, the data that's come out, there were more people that died from drug overdoses than were killed in the Vietnam War. As a matter of fact, in 2015, there were over 55,000 fatalities of drug overdoses. I mean, traffic accidents only accounted for 38,000. So there's no stigma attached to somebody who has bone cancer. There's no stigma to somebody who has heart disease. And if we're really going to be honest and talk about it, it doesn't really matter, because at the end, they're sick. They need treatment. So what is it going to take? If it's shame, then great, we'll take that. Put them into treatment and use that as a motivational factor. But at the end of the day, it's all about repairing their futures, things that haven't happened yet. But let's take what is, learn from it, and move on to what can be.
Okay, great. Well, thank you, Jim, for that. And I wanted to bring back Corey for a second and elaborate a little bit more on what you said, now that we've got, taken the temperature of the panelists. And you said you just actually came and spoke about this, about the stigma, and how, you're sick of hearing about it. Are you still with us, Corey? I think Corey might have froze. How about, let me just make sure everybody else is still. Mark, are you still with us?
I think Corey's
okay, I'm still here.
Oh, Corey's here.
Yeah, sorry.
Okay. That's okay.
I had to switch over my internet connection. I was having issues. Sorry, I was having issues with my internet connection.
So what I had asked you was just to elaborate a little bit about what you just said, that you just actually came out against saying that, about you're sick and tired of hearing about the stigma of addiction, as from the perspective of a former addict.
Yeah, well, and I said in my video the other day, and some people didn't like it, and I really don't care if people like what I have to say or not. Okay, stigma, in my video I talked about, you can replace it with the word prejudice. Okay, it's people looking down on other people because they're different. So we are different than, normies, as we call them, in the fellowships. And they're going to look at us differently, whether we like it or not. Prejudice has been an issue in humankind since the beginning of time. People have been fighting against prejudice, and there's still plenty of prejudice. So I feel like focusing on trying to fight something that we're not going to win the fight against is a waste of time. Whereas, if we just focused on educating, spreading awareness and doing our part and being living examples, then that in itself will start to lessen the stigma over time. But I hear so much talk, there's a show on recoveryradio.fm that I produce called Shattering the Stigma. I hate that name. I cannot stand all the focus on fighting against something. That's like saying, let's go to war for peace. Okay, so we're disrupting peace to try to find peace. That doesn't make any sense. So we're now fighting against stigma, bringing more awareness and more focus on stigma. And to me, due to the law of attraction, that's just going to manifest more stigma. So it doesn't make any sense to me. It's ridiculous, if you ask me.
I think that's a good point. I think, though, on the other hand, when we're talking about this, we're saying, will it prevent, like, people who feel ashamed? Maybe they're an alcoholic or they're doing drugs, and the shame stops them from telling someone or seeking treatment. So bringing the awareness to that, there's a lot of shame involved with family members and, everybody surrounding the addict as well.
Yeah, and I understand that side of it, but addiction is rooted in shame. So even if other people weren't shaming us, we'd still feel ashamed, if you ask me. And like, for me, that shame was a huge part in pushing me to change my life. Pain is the cornerstone to all growth. So without that shame, without the pain of feeling like I was doing something wrong, would I have ever thought that I was doing anything wrong with my life and living wrongly? Probably not. So to me, it's not such an issue. As an addict, I was going to feel ashamed of what I was doing regardless, because due to ethics and morals and society's view on what is right and wrong, whether or not, I was going to feel ashamed. So it doesn't matter to me.
Okay, that's interesting. Mark, what is your opinion on what Corey just said?
Well, I think from my perspective, when I'm sitting with a mom and dad, there's the dynamics between one parent and the other. One parent, has this sort of guilty feeling that they did something wrong, and the other parent says, I don't care if you think you did something wrong. There's something wrong with our kid, and he needs to, get the strength to figure this out, and I'm going to cut him off. So, I mean, I see sort of, if there's an issue of stigma or the word that Corey used, which was prejudice, which I think is perhaps an even better word. But I mean, I think that, from my perspective, I see that sort of stigma prejudice issue, within the family dynamics. And that makes it difficult for the family to understand that they need to do something. They got to make the decision for the kid. So, from a lawyer's perspective, it's about making the decision to get that kid into treatment. And I think to Jim's point, if you don't get him into treatment, then the other two options, which are, the morgue or prison, become viable options. I mean, and I think as Jim said, it really is about the future, and that future doesn't begin until you start addressing the issue of addiction and whatever the root cause of that is. And sometimes, as Corey said, there's that whole issue of shame, right? I mean, maybe that was brought on by some type of trauma. So, I'm not a therapist, but I spend a lot of time what I like to call triaging the case, like finding out what's really going on. Because if somebody has a trauma-based issue, you can send them to all the treatment centers in the world. They'll get clean, but they won't ever stay clean. So, that's sort of my perspective. It's the family dynamics that I have to deal with on a daily basis.
That makes a lot of sense. Jim, what about you? What is your feelings on what Corey said?
No, I think he's exactly right, because I think all of that basically can be equated into one word, which is blame. And that's great, but that doesn't solve the problem, because in the end, what you're looking for is a solution. And that is the entire focus of substance abuse. It's a solution to take you from where you are to where you need to be so that you can have a healthy, productive life. And there are people in every walk of life that have situations that nobody knows about. It's just the outward manifestations of drug and substance abuse and alcohol abuse that seem to take on a little more of a sinister overtone. But at the end of the day, it's transitioning from the past and looking toward what they can be in the future, and the realization that that doesn't have to be their future. And if it takes a little bit of shame, if it takes a little bit of stigma, then by all means, I would rather have somebody shamed into sobriety and have a happy, healthy life than to act like nothing's wrong and then have to sit there at their funeral and think, man, I wish there was something we could have said or done. Because at the end, it's such a waste to not take that step forward.
Probably can hear me. That's a really good point. I guess I'm just going to bring this back to Corey now. Just from knowing somebody who actually died from addiction and went through a whole he was, kicked out of his house. He was, obviously lots of shame, lots of stigma. None of that motivated him. And he was 23 years old. This was my friend's son. He winded up, unfortunately, passing. And then I kind of saw it from a different perspective. I used to have more of that perspective, the tough love, just, you let the rock bottom, let them hit the ground, let their butt hit the ground, and the pain is going to force them pain or pleasure, until that happened, because after that happened, I started thinking of it in a different perspective, just as, that there was really, I guess, nothing anyone could have done to save this person. So what are your thoughts on that? Like, does it not work for everybody? I mean, is there other more ways? Because I know your views on it, but is there, it's not one size fits all, basically.
No, I mean, we're talking about addiction. So
right.
I understand I'll just go back 2 years ago when the fentanyl thing started. And I went to 16 funerals in 90 days. I lost my girlfriend. I lost a lot of close friends. I lost a lot of people in a matter of 3 months. And this is tricky, to quote one of the literatures, cunning, baffling, powerful. It's not one size fits all. We don't, I don't think any of us really know how to really go about this in the correct way with every person. If so, then we would have a cure by now, and everybody would be paying tons of money for it. And it's just not the way it goes. I just know that for me, the way I see our day and age is everybody is offended by everything. Everything is shameful. Everything is offensive, and it's really annoying to me. Tough love is what worked for me, and I've seen it work for a lot of other people. And, and to go back, I think it was Jim mentioned something on, focusing on the problem. And I feel like there's entirely too much focus on the problem, if we could just think of, for me, at the beginning and end of every single meeting I go to, we say the Serenity Prayer. Okay, I can't change the stigma. I can't change what people think about me or other addicts. I'm not going to change it. I can throw a fit about it, get on Facebook and talk about it all I want. I can talk till I'm blue in the face. I'm not going to change other people's opinions. So trying to focus on changing something that I have no control over is focusing on the problem for me. Whereas if I can just accept the fact that people are going to be prejudiced no matter how much I dislike it, and just focus on living my life the best of my ability, being a living example, and living around the fact there's a stigma, my life's been great doing that. And I've never had an issue with stigma because I don't focus on the stigma. I just focus on my goals, and I do whatever it takes to reach them. And people that are in active addiction, regardless of whether there's a stigma, whether there's shame or not, it's their choice if the pain has been enough or not. And I mean, and then when you look at it from a family's perspective, the entire thing is confusing. So I don't really know what the solution is, but I don't think it's trying to fight a losing war against the fact that people are prejudiced over everything and anything that's different about them. It's been that way forever. So I don't see there being a solution in focusing on it and trying to fight against it. I think we should just focus on integrating into the community and spreading awareness, and over time that's going to make a difference. But it's not going to, I don't think there's any magical switch that we just flip and, oh, okay, stigma's gone. It's never going to be gone. It's never going to be gone. There's going to be people who think we are piece of crap junkies, piece of crap drunks that aren't worth anything. And you know how you prove them wrong? You get clean and sober, you work program of recovery, and you become a living example. That's easier said than done. We're going to lose a lot more people, getting there than we want to, but that's the reality of this disease. That's just the way it is.
And the other aspect of this would be that we'll talk about is the family aspect. We're talking about the addict shame and how that may motivate or not motivate them. But I want to ask you, Mark, about because you brought up the families. There's when a family is ashamed of the addict or a loved one, and they're embarrassed and they don't want to talk about it to other people, or they feel anger toward them. Mark, you probably see a lot of that when they come to see you. You know, they're probably very angry and stuff too. How do we address the other people besides the addicts feeling these feelings of shame and stigma?
So, I think that one of the things I try to do is, and I noticed this, I think I've talked about this before, but when my father had, I lost my dad at the beginning of the year, but for the 2 years before that, thank you. For the 2 years before that, my mom and I were busy, taking him either us taking him to the emergency room or calling 911. And, I noticed over a period of time, because we spent a lot of time in ICUs and ERs, I noticed this sort of emotional toll it was taking on my mom, my brother, and my sister. And I know when I sit with a family, and I noticed this perhaps for the very first time I sat with a family of a young man that needed help, is the emotional toll that addiction takes on the family. I mean, it's like a cancer throughout the entire family, and it does destroy families, and it will destroy a family. And so one of the things I try to counsel the parents on is the importance of taking care of their own emotional health. And maybe they need to refer to a therapist. I mean, maybe, they just, I think they need to understand the dynamics of what's going on, right? Why do they feel the way they feel? Whether it's feelings of guilt, or whether it's feeling of shame, or, why does mom feel one way and the dad feels the other, whatever it happens to be. And the other thing they need to understand is why their son or daughter can't make the rational decision for themselves, with regards to treatment, or if they've been going to treatment, why they constantly relapse. And I think, helping them just to understand the dynamics of their own feelings and what's going on with their son or daughter is a contributing factor, to a successful outcome for the entire family. So, I mean, you got to have that conversation with them. And a lot of the time, I'm blessed to have, a lot of people that I know in the treatment community, probably partly because I come to the luncheons that you put on, Christina. But, I really defer to a lot of those folks, and I say, look, I think you need to have a conversation with somebody over, maybe it's the treatment center we're hoping to send their son or daughter to, and so they can understand what's going on, because the family dynamics, I mean, it's bad enough you got a kid who's an addict and he's been, he or she's fighting it for their life, as it were, and now you've got mom and dad who can't, who are really at odds with each other over whether or not they want to, they're done. I mean, and sometimes they are done. And I've had families where we're done. I mean, we're just done. We can't take it anymore. So, I mean, it's a tough problem. It's not just, file a Marchman Act, get the kid into treatment, everybody's happy. There's a problem here that affects everybody, and it has to be addressed.
Yeah, and that's the thing. There's a lot of families who, they're going to blame themselves. Maybe they think that they weren't a good enough parent, that to cause this. They don't want their friends and other family to find out. They're just dealing with those deep feelings of, so it's shame all around, whether it's the addict or the family member or the loved one, but them taking that responsibility and then getting to the point, like you said, where they're just done. They just can't handle it anymore.
Sorry to interrupt. One of the questions I get asked on a very regular basis is this confidential? Will anybody find out about it? Can they go on the clerk screen and look at it? And I, look up the Marchman, and I have to explain to them, look, the Marchman Act is confidential. The hearing is confidential. And, no, you can't go and just sort of look it up and find out about it like you could, say, a criminal or civil case. You can't go to the clerk of court's website. So, there's that, I know we're trying not to use the word, Corey, stigma, but, there's that prejudice that, we don't want our neighbors to find out that our son or our daughter is an addict, because now we'll be looked down on. So
exactly, and then also having, just bringing up with the law is having criminal records. I know someone who was 16 years old, got caught with a couple of pills of ecstasy, was then charged with selling them and tried as an adult, spent 6 months in jail. But the thing that happened to this man was he winded up, it followed him over for years, where he wasn't able to get a job over this. I mean, which is ridiculous. So that's a stigma in another sort, because now we've got addicts who maybe when as teenagers were arrested or whatever, and they have felony charges for whatever they did, nonviolent, and that they've got this black mark on their record when they go to work, and they could be long being treated. This particular person wasn't even an addict. They just got involved in the bad crowd and was caught with a couple of these. So that's a whole other issue there that you probably see a lot, Mark.
Yeah, I mean, look, I spend probably a third of my time in criminal court because, unfortunately, one of the things to deal with when you're dealing with addicts is unfortunately they lie, cheat, and steal. Not because they're bad, because that's just the nature of what they're dealing with. And sometimes they make what we would consider irrational or silly decisions. And yeah, they get caught with something. And now, the fight is not can I keep them out of jail? The fight is can I prevent them from becoming a convicted felon? Because when you hear that
Right.
term convicted felon, um, or he's a convicted felon or she's a convicted felon. Well, maybe nobody cares that they were an addict and got caught with a pill or two in their pocket that they were using to deal with an issue that arose when they were a child and they were sexually abused by a teacher. They don't care. You're a convicted felon. That's it. So the battle for me is to try and save save them from going to jail or prison. Is to try and keep their future intact by preventing them from becoming a convicted felon. And if it's a first time offense, there's a good chance you can do that. If it's a second or third, yeah, it might be a problem. It might be a problem.
And that's just good advice. Anybody watching that, if you can, if you have the resources, seek out someone like Mark to help you, because you don't want to have that kind of black mark if especially somebody who's recovered and it's going to follow them for 10, 15, 20 years down the line, and then having to have this felony charge, always following them around. So if you can get legal help, that's the best way to be able to prevent, if you can prevent something like that. So I'm going to ask Jim now. I just want to I'll throw this over to Jim. Let me unmute Jim. I've been just muting everybody so we don't have as much echo here. Jim, what are your feelings about this with the concerning family, like we were just talking about with Mark, and and how this can follow you, for the rest of your life if and if you get a felony charge at a young age?
Well, families are unique. They can be your greatest source of strength, and they can be the exact opposite. And every family is different. They have different dynamics. They interact with each other differently because everybody is a unique individual. But at the end of the day, the family is the greatest opportunity if it's present to affect change in a loved one's life, because addiction doesn't just affect that one individual. And I know it's cliched, but it is truly a disease that will bring in everybody into its sphere of influence. So it's a real opportunity. And there are times, and because we interact with MedEz, we interact with facilities across the country every day with our clients. And, there are times through therapy that they try to interact with the person undergoing treatment, but they also bring in the family, because a lot of times there are dynamics there that are driving that addiction or a cause of that addiction, or the family is so overwhelmed by their sense of helplessness that they have to have therapy themselves. And we see this every single day with every one of our clients, whether they're single practitioners or they're large in or outpatient hospital facilities. So the family can be the greatest opportunity, and then there are times that the family can be the greatest danger, the thing that is the biggest danger to a relapse or continuing in their addiction. So you can't take, like Tori said, a one-size-fits-all. It has to be an individual approach, but there has to be the awareness that there are other people impacted by this disease of addiction, and the very front line is going to be the family members, whether they're blood or not, that are considered family by the person who's undergoing the addiction.
That's a really very good point, Jim. Thank you for sharing that. And Corey, circling back to you now, and then bringing up the point of, since you've been through it personally, and obviously you have friends who a lot of people. The fact that I know you hate stigma and shame, but it can follow. You could be clean for a very long time, but yet that it's something that can follow you for a very long time as well. What are your thoughts on that?
I'm sorry. Can you repeat that real quick for me?
Sure. So basically, what I was asking was the fact that when you're an addict, and even if you get clean and clean up your life, can you hear me now?
Yeah.
Okay, so when you're having those kind of getting like a felony charge, or having people still look down at you, years later after you've been clean because you're labeled an addict, what is your thoughts on that?
I'm having like major network issues. Sorry. Okay, for me, luckily I never had any legal issues that now haunt me. That was pure luck. There was many times I should have caught a case and somehow got out of it. But right now, our legal system and our government isn't exactly working for us in addiction. I do believe there are some baby steps being made in the right direction, but they're baby steps. And it's something that I deal with a lot with people that reach out to me and get help. Once they get clean as felons. And I can look up a list of places that hire felons. Usually they're not the best jobs, but they're jobs. I don't know. That's a tough one. That's a tough situation because, I mean, down here in Florida, there are a lot of places they know there are a lot of people down here in recovery, fresh out of treatment. There's a lot of places that won't do a background check because they don't want to have to tell someone no. I know, but, they're restaurant jobs. They're, working in a coffee shop, working, jobs like that. They're not paying you that well, but it is a source of income. And then back where I'm from in Indiana, Illinois, there's a ton of factory jobs that they'll hire felons. They purposely have things set up so they can hire felons because they realize that it's an issue. It's one of those things that like I said, there's baby steps being made in the direction that it needs to go and starting to be looked at more as a health issue rather than a criminal issue. But I think we're a long ways from where we need to be. But luckily we have people like Tim Ryan and Michael DeLeon and these people out there going on the news and talking about it, meeting with, Congress members and Senate members, and there's people out there doing things that, I hope to be, sometime in the near future. There's people out there making steps and talking to the right people to make a change. The thing with changes as large as what we're talking about is they take time. It's not like anything, whether it's changing my life or changing laws, it's not a flip of the switch. It's something that it's a drawn out process. You got to talk to the right people, and I don't know, that's something that I feel like probably for the next 5 years, there's still going to be a lot of struggles with. And when talking about dealing with shame, now that, I've been clean and I'm living a productive life, I don't feel shame. I believe shame's an inside job. People can say whatever they want about me, but for me, working the 12 steps and living a life that I wake up and I look at myself in the mirror every day and I love who I am, I don't really care what people think about me. But that's a process. Being early in recovery, the reality is there's still going to be people who look down on us. And even, there's still people, I know people that have been clean for 5 years and people still comment on their posts on Facebook, telling them, calling them junkies, telling them to get off Facebook. And you know what? It's just the reality of it. The reality is there's going to be people who don't like us because once upon a time I was a junkie who stole from everybody I knew and did a lot of horrible things. Do I care what they think today? No, I really don't care. I know who I am today. And I have, there's this cool thing on Facebook where you can press this block button and you never have to see those people again. It's crazy how you don't have to participate in the shaming of others. You can block people from calling your phone. You can block people from texting. You can block people from Facebook. You can just walk away from people on the streets. You don't have to participate and stew in being shamed. It's a choice to take things personally or not. And it's something that I've learned. Quick little plug here. There's a book called The 4 Agreements that was given to me in treatment. Life-changing. One of the agreements is don't take things personally, and it's something that changed my life because I read that book and I started praying about, help me not to take things personally today. It's something that you learn through working the 12 steps, working the thorough 4th and 5th step, and trying to integrate the 4 agreements into my life. I don't care what people think about me. The stigma and the shame of someone in active addiction is something that I feel like is going to be impossible to get rid of. But the stigma and shame after you've gotten clean and into recovery, that's up to you. It's up to me, because now I've learned to love myself. I don't have to take everything that someone says personally. I can look at you and be like, hey man, that's your opinion, and move on with my day. It's once you're clean and sober, I think it's up to the individual to stay, walk away from the shame, don't participate in it, and live your life. Help others, do what you can.
Well, that's very
that's my opinion
empowering.
on it.
Very, very empowering advice, Corey, there. I think that's a great point, that you can empower yourself. You don't have to take it personally. And for the addict, that's really great advice. But when we look at the danger, and I'm going to bring this back to Mark because this involves more with the law, some of the dangers of stigma would be, for example, there are several, and I've read this in the news a few times, there have been several towns, and I think one in Florida wanted to do this, but they wanted to limit the amount of Narcan shots given on an ambulance. So if an addict, overdosed 2 times, the 3rd time they would say, do not waste your shot on him. So that's an example of a stigma, right? Would you say? And this is going on. So what Corey says is absolutely right as far as, empowerment, the 4 Agreements is a phenomenal book. I've read that book, Don Miguel Ruiz, if you're looking for that book. Phenomenal. And in personal empowerment, you can choose, absolutely. But on the wider scope of it, we've got uneducated people who are prejudiced against addiction, who want to put laws into place that can actually cause people to die. So Mark, what is your opinion on that?
Yeah, I have heard about stuff like that, and frankly, it sort of boggles the mind, right? If this was a cat or a dog, we'd be up in arms about it, but it's an addict, so who cares, right?
And that's the point, right?
Yeah. To go back, I think we were talking about the whole issue of the criminal system. So a couple of things here in Florida, the legislative mandate is to punish. It's right there in black and white, and you can read it for yourself. Rehabilitation is number 2. So when you consider that probably 80% of people who are in the criminal justice system are there because they have an addiction or mental health issue, and we're looking to, quote, punish these people, I think we can start to understand why our criminal justice system has become a revolving door. And I'm not saying that there aren't people who need to be punished. Look, I was a prosecutor for 5.5 years. You get somebody who rapes a rapist, a murderer, some type of violent felony with this, somebody gets hurt. Look, I'm all for putting those people in prison because they're just a danger, and, there has to be some punishment. But when you think about most of the people who are there because they have an addiction or mental health issue, and we're not looking to rehabilitate those people, then, I don't know the numbers, but we must be spending an absolute fortune. I'm talking trillions of dollars on people who are just sort of going in and out of the criminal justice system because we're not getting access to treatment and we're not taking care of them the right way. So, I guess, to a certain extent, we're our own worst enemy. So I think that when we get a handle on that and start treating it as a disease and stop treating it as, just somebody who committed a crime, then I think we'll have a whole different level of understanding of where our tax dollars are going to. One thing in Florida, we have this legal fiction. It's called a withhold of adjudication. So what does that mean? That means that if you get charged with a felony, you can plead guilty to a felony and not actually, quote, get convicted. I don't know how many states have it. Florida has it. So what it does is it enables you to plead guilty to a felony without actually becoming a convicted felon. So that's one of the things that we fight for, when I'm in criminal court. So, on one hand, you've got the legislative mandate, which is to punish people. And then we've created this sort of legal fiction, which says, we're going to punish you, but we won't make you a convicted felon, at least not this time. It's difficult. And I think that, and truth be told, look, you have a terrible inequity in the system too, right? People who don't have money, who can't afford insurance, who don't have cash pay, for the most part, have a difficult time getting into treatment, right? They don't get private counsel. So there's inequity. So, the conversation I have with the family when they come to see me, whether it's, a criminal case or a Marshman case, is do you have insurance? Can you afford to go get treatment? because without any of those two, without that ability to get treatment, it's very, very difficult to solve the problem. And as one client told me who had already been to prison and unfortunately is going back, he told me, and he told the judge, that he had better access to drugs when he was in prison than when he was out in the street. So sending someone to prison isn't, necessarily the answer to getting him clean. So, I mean, it's difficult, but I think at the end of the day, you've got to make treatment available, and we have to become a society that realizes that people who have a disease need help. I mean, it's like telling somebody who's got cancer, stop having cancer. I mean, it's insanity. I mean, and if you told me you had cancer, and I said, well, stop having cancer, you'd look at me like I was an idiot, right?
Absolutely.
So I mean, that's kind of what we're doing to addicts, right? Stop being an addict. That's insanity. So I think once we get a handle on that, and I think that sort of goes part and parcel with this whole issue of stigma and prejudice, right? Treating people as if, as human beings who have a disease as opposed to just, a junkie, then I think our approach to helping those people will change, right? Our approach in the criminal justice system will change. Our approach to funding treatment for everybody will change. So, I mean, I think all these things sort of do tie together, but until we make that decision, then I think we're going to be talking about this for a long time.
Yes, I agree, Mark. Thank you. And what you said, just to play the devil's advocate on that about cancer, and I'm going to throw this over to Jim now with this question. When we say it's like cancer, a lot of people would say, well, someone with cancer didn't choose to get cancer, and so they go back to that whole thing about choice again, thinking that the addict has this choice, But at our last show, and Mark will remember this, Heidi McCork brought up a really good point saying, what about the analogy of it being like Alzheimer's or dementia, where if addiction's like that, you see someone acting out who's got Alzheimer's and acting crazy behavior, you don't blame them. They've got a disease of the brain. And so if addiction's more of a disease of the brain, that might help people think about it a little bit differently than the cancer analogy, because people say, well, the addict, the cancer, that doesn't, they still don't have that compassion for somebody. So what are your thoughts, Jim, on what we've been discussing about this, about, how this as, yes, on one hand, personally as an addict, if you're an addict, and you've recovered like Corey, and you can empower yourself and just not deal with the stigma, but when it comes to the point where decisions are being made in legislation and the way we treat, like Mark brought up, a really important part about how we punish first and then second in the courts, rehabilitate. So what are your thoughts on all of this?
Well, I've got a unique perspective on that, in that I deal every day with a wide range of facilities that range from facilities operating in impoverished areas to facilities who have almost a resort-like option for the folks that are fortunate enough to be able to afford their services. But one of the things that Mark said that had brought something to my mind that I'm seeing more and more. It started a few years ago, but I'm seeing it now, and it's cropping up in every state, and that's the emergence of drug courts on the county level, where a county judge will establish a drug court, a lot of times with grant money from that state, and they will then sentence that person to treatment. And I believe the recidivism rate, if a person successfully goes through those drug court programs, is much lower than if they were just simply sent to prison and had to tough out withdrawal. And then when they come back on the streets, they're thrust back into the same situation with the same friends. And we have several clients, dozens of clients in many states that do take referrals from drug courts. And I believe as I see this, I think it just acknowledges a recognition by the state that the current program is not working. If you take somebody and you throw them in jail and you dry them out involuntarily, but you don't do anything about the underlying situation, then in the end, when it comes back out, they're going to do the same thing over again. So they realize that they've got to reinvent the wheel, and this is something that we're seeing here at MedEz almost on a daily basis. Right before this call, I had a demo with a client who does a large portion of their business from the state that they're in to the county drug courts in the counties that they service. As far as it being equated as not a disease, if you would have told somebody 20 years ago that we would completely map out the human genome they probably would have laughed at you and thought perhaps maybe you had an addiction issue at the time. But as science progresses, we are learning more and more the effects of substances and alcohol and how it totally reprograms the pathways in the brain and the behavior that those control. And I have no doubt that as we go on more and more technologically speaking, we're going to find out that there are things that are predisposed within people that may just may be the luck of the draw. You may have a gene that makes you more susceptible to cancer or asthma or for example, Alzheimer's. And it's not a conscious choice that you made at birth. I think I'm gonna be an Alzheimer's patient someday, or I'm gonna develop heart disease. And the thing is that we just need to get away from the blame and focus on the solution. And like Corey said, the stigma is really something. Once you're in treatment, that you can choose not to participate in, because truly that stigma is just something that society labels. And I would rather deal with a societal label that you can ignore than an actual concrete label that lays over top of your casket that's chiseled into stone. So in the end, it's all about getting people into treatment and enabling them to live the life that they can live productively.
Absolutely, absolutely. Thank you, Jim, for that. That makes a lot of sense. And I'll just bring this back to Corey, if you can hear me. The education, I guess it all comes down to education. We're talking a lot about educating. And I know you say the prejudice won't end, and that people are going to still, be angry and judge addicts. But is there any way we can educate them to have a little more compassion for people going through addiction?
Yeah, I believe we can. Doing things like this right here. I do videos online. I participate in recoveryradio.fm. I have some speaking events planned out at, a couple universities, and I believe there's a lot we can do, but it's a matter of, getting up and taking some action, getting out there and not being afraid to put your face out there with, the label of I'm a recovering addict. It's one of those, like I've said before, it's baby steps, it's the ripple effect. Everything that I do today as a recovering addict creates a ripple effect. Because I am public about what I'm doing and who I am, and that I am a recovering addict. That in itself is educating to people who don't know, and some people will listen, and some people won't, and that's just what it boils down to. We still deal with racism all over this country, even though there's been plenty of educating about how skin color doesn't. But there's still a ton of people who don't believe that and hate other people because their skin color is different. Even with educating, that it's only going to go so far. I believe there's a lot of different pathways that we can go with educating people. Such as, like I said, doing public speeches, having podcasts and radio broadcasts about addiction and recovery. And just putting on public events and things like that, but it's only gonna do so much. You can only do so much in a 24-hour period that you have every day to educate and to spread awareness. And at the end of the day, there's gonna be some people who don't care, and that's just the reality of it. I don't know. That's. And like I said, there's people that are going to speak to people in the government. I think those are important things that we need to do is to speak to public officials and Congress and Senate members, and write Congress, and continue to do these marches and events that are getting public attention. And over time, they'll make a difference. At the end of the day, I feel like everyone is trying to focus on the short term, and this isn't an issue that's going to be fixed or solved in short term. It's going to take time. It's going to take patience. And the more people get angry about it and get in these arguments and you know, the more people do that, the worse it makes us look. It's actually building a stigma. You know, when I see people get on these Facebook posts and they start arguing, and then suddenly now you're stooping down to the level of these people that are hating you by saying immature, childish things, you're creating more of a stigma. You know, I think it's a matter of gaining some control of yourself, realizing what you can and cannot control in other people, and not stooping to the level of the ignorance of some of these people that aren't educated, and just do the right thing. And over time, it's going to make a difference. We've came a long ways since, you know, back in the day. NA was formed because AA was shaming heroin addicts, you know, back in the day. That's what it boiled down to. So we've came a long way in society. You know, we're not just like locking people up now because we are, but we're not just locking up people and forgetting about them. We have a large community of people out here that are trying to help. So I don't know. It's at the end of the day, there's only so much we can do. But if you're not doing your part, then I feel like you really have nothing to say about it. If you're not participating and being out there and using your voice to spread awareness and educate others, then you can only be so upset about it.
Well, I think that's a really good point, Corey, is the fact that, you know, and anybody who's watching this who has recovered, is in recovery, and you're still feeling that shame that you don't want to come forward because you feel you're still going to be judged, you know, you could help a lot of people by coming forward. Let's show the success stories, people like Corey. You know, let's show the end of the rainbow. You know, you can get through this. There is a light at the end of the tunnel. Maybe that would be a better analogy. That if you do the process, if you go through recovery, you can be successful. You know, and I think the more people that stand up and say that will help reduce the stigma as well, because, you know, more people can come forward without that type of shame. I wanted to ask Mark quickly, Mark, because you see, we were talking about this earlier about, you know, family members that are you know, are maybe, you know, feeling so much shame that they don't, you know, they don't know what to do. I'm going to just ask you what, Mark, you think, if you were to talk to somebody right now who's has a loved one who's an addict, what would you say to them as far as, you know, dealing with if they're feeling shame about coming forward, about hiring an attorney or getting help for that particular person? What would your advice be to them?
Yeah, that is a great question, I guess, to finish out with. I spoke to a group of lawyers yesterday, not always the easiest of crowds, and so, not a lot of hugs in that room. But, one of the things I said to them was that I've lost count of how many crying mums I've had in my office, right? I go through a lot of tissues in my office, and I'm a bit of a sucker for a crying mum as it is. So, I had one in my office last night. We were here till 8:15, and I said to her, look, you have to understand something. This isn't your fault. It's not your husband's fault. It's not your son's fault, right? It just is. I mean, it's like telling my mother when my father passed away because he had heart disease that it was her fault, right? That she fed him horrible food for the last 50 years and she caused heart disease. I mean, it's sort of that kind of analogy. It just is. And frankly, I don't ever think that anything gets solved by playing the blame game anyway, even though it's no one's fault, but starting to point fingers. And I've seen that between a mom and a dad. Like, dad says, you're an enabler. Mom says, well, you want to, just cut them off. That doesn't help either. So I don't think pointing the finger helps in anybody. And it just isn't anybody's fault. It just is. I mean, it's just the nature of the beast. And so, the conversation that I have and the content I try to put out online is, look, stop focusing on the problem and start thinking about a solution. And from my perspective, the solution is treatment, right? Because otherwise it's prison or the morgue. So, that's the conversation I have with the families. You got to make this decision for them. You got to get them into treatment. But, I think to Corey's point, I think that, the platforms like this, Christina, are just an excellent way to help educate people and not just educate people, but to let families know that they're not the only ones that are dealing with, this disease. I think there's sort of this, if there is a stigma, it's, part of it is, well, nobody else in the neighborhood has to deal with this. Only our son is an addict, or only our daughter's an addict. And I will tell you that addiction doesn't give a rat's what what color your skin is, how much money you have in the bank, what your religious background is, where you grew up, and any of that other mumbo jumbo. It doesn't care. And so, as I'm sure, Jim and Corey will tell you, if you're a family dealing with addiction, you're not alone. I can promise you that. It's everywhere and it's rampant. And I don't care if you're in Cleveland, Ohio, or Boca Raton, Florida. It's everywhere. So I think we got to knock it off with the blame game and all that other stuff. And I think that talking about it is good. I think it helps people not feel alone. And, as Corey rightly said, there's always going to be some bonehead on social media, poo-pooing what we do. Well, good luck to them, and when it affects their family or affects someone they know, then they'll realize, guess what? It affects everybody. And if you think just because it's not in your family, if you don't think it's affecting you, take a look at your community, because it's destroying your community too. And so don't think you can run and hide and just avoid this thing. And as I tell a lot of people, unfortunately, people don't realize we are our brother's keeper and we are our sister's keeper. And maybe we're our son and daughter's keeper too. So, this is everybody's problem, and everybody has to step up to the plate, because eventually it will affect you, whoever you are. I don't care if you're living in a cave somewhere, I don't have any friends or family. It will eventually affect you. So, I think that talking about it is great, and we just have to, ignore the poo-pooers and naysayers and get on with what we need to do, which is to really start moving in the right direction. And I think, as Jim pointed out, we've got drug courts now in a lot of our counties and states. And so we are moving in the right direction, but it's going to take time. And the more we talk about it, and the more we push, I think the better results we'll get.
Yeah, you make some great points there, Mark. And I want to bring this over to Jim now. Jim, what Mark said was really important, especially the fact about, it just is. I really like that, because it's true. You could put the blame game all around on mom, dad, this one, that one, but it's the fact is, it's the reality. You're dealing with this addiction within your family. And I think he brings up a really good point, Brad. What are some of your takes on both what Corey and Mark has said? What is your opinion on that?
Well, I've been privileged to meet both of them. We met, I think it was a couple weeks ago, at the luncheon in Boca. And, I've always been impressed with Mark as well as Corey. And, the thing is that when you're talking about blame, you're talking about the past. And, if you could go back and change something, don't you think you would have already done it? I mean, if I could change something, I would have gone back and had Ohio State not embarrass me Saturday night with Iowa. But we can't change that. And if you focus on what you cannot bring change to, you're never going to affect change. And, the other side of the coin is that you can't want something for somebody unless they want it for themselves. But at the same time, you have to be in a position to where you're aware of what's going on. You are in a position where you're offering support, but yet you're not enabling. This is a tightrope that families walk. If they fall off to one side, it's guilt beyond guilt. And if they fall off to the other side, they risk losing a loved one. So, I don't envy Mark because he deals in a legal profession, which gives me headaches thinking about it. But he deals in a profession that deals with addiction. And, the thing with Corey is so upfront and so honest about it. And honestly, the only way to ever get rid of stigma is to just simply acknowledge it and move on. The best way to prove somebody wrong is to live your life to the fullest of your potential, because in the end, it's your life, it's not theirs. And, we take great pride here at MedEz because we actually get to work every day with people who make a difference in the lives of people in the substance abuse field. And it is such a pleasure for us to see this. We have this conversation every single day with facilities. How can they improve? How can they reach more people? Because this epidemic is not going away. It's getting worse. And the problem is that if we don't acknowledge it and come up with some concrete plans, and it doesn't have to be the end-all plan, it just has to be a start. Take a step. make a difference today, make something today better than what it was yesterday, and then tomorrow build on that. And that's what we try to do, and that's what I see Corey doing every day. And my hat's off to both of these guys, because they're in the trenches every single day, working tirelessly to bring people to the point where they can shed that stigma and they can live their life the way they need to be.
Well, thank you, Jim and Mark and Corey. This has been fantastic. You guys are all so informative and educated with this, and helping so many people by sharing your knowledge. So we're at the 1 o'clock mark. What I want to do is, I'll start with Jim, is I want you just to give us your contact information, where people can reach you, your email, and also put it in the comments later on, and then I'll go to Corey and then Mark to do the same.
Absolutely. You can reach me. My name is Jim Henderson. My phone number is 954-332-4700. My direct extension is 218. The company I work for is MedEz. That's MED, E as in Edward, Z as in zebra, and my email address is jimh@MedEz. We're located in Davie, Florida. We have offices in Connecticut as well as Louisiana, and we service the entire United States.
Thank you so much, Jim. I really appreciate you being with us today. And Corey, would you tell us where we can reach you, a little bit about the company and your website and your email address and your phone number?
Okay. Yep, I'm Corey Wolcott. I work for Genesis House in Lake Worth, Florida. We're a private treatment center. Been down here since 1992. You can reach me at my cell phone number is 217-799-5776. It's always on me. If I don't answer, leave a message. I'll get back to you. My email address is corew@genesishouse.net, and also facebook.com/CoreyTheBearLive is always open to reach me at. And the number for Genesis House is 1-800-737-0933. You can get a hold of me through any of those ways. Like I said, if I don't answer right away, I will get back to you. My phone goes off like nonstop. I think I've checked it like 20 times during this hour. Yeah, work for Genesis House. We've been down here helping people since '92. It's a small 30-bed facility. We do detox. We do residential, PHP, as well as IOP. And if you don't have insurance, I will help you find a Medicaid or free facility or a halfway house to get you into. I do whatever I can. So.
Thank you so much, Corey. You're absolutely wonderful, and that's really great to know that you also help people who don't have the insurance and that they can contact you. So, Mark, tell us where we can reach you, where your email address is, your phone number.
Okay, so we're a law firm. We're based in Boca Raton, Florida, and the only thing that we do is help families and individuals that are in crisis because of addiction and mental health. So as you can imagine, we're not very busy these days. You can find me on the web, drugandalcoholattorneys.com. You can email me at mark, M-A-R-K, at drugandalcoholattorneys.com. And the phone number here is 561-419-6095. And you can find me on Facebook under Mark, middle initial G, Astor, A-S-T-O-R, or we have a Facebook page for the law firm, Drug and Alcohol Attorneys. So I think that should cover it.
Well, I just want to really, again, thank you once again. You guys have all been fantastic. And I know we did have people watching and have comments on. We can go back on the show. People were commenting on the show, and I really hope it helps somebody watching. And to get educated, and to really learn more, and what we can do as our part to help end this epidemic that is killing more people than war, as was mentioned earlier. So thank you guys so much. Have a wonderful day. We hope to see you again on the show. And thank you, everybody who was watching. Have a wonderful day.
Thank you.
Thanks.
Take care. Bye-bye.
Bye-bye.
Bye-bye.